podcast where nothing's off the table. From Bible mysteries and strange phenomena to the questions that keep you up at night, we explore it all with curiosity and faith. I'm your host, Courtney, joined by my co-hosts Caleb and Jeremy. Together, we dive into the weird, the wonderful, and the wildly curious. So grab your coffee, open your mind, and let's babble. All right, welcome back, everyone, to the Power of Babble. We have a very interesting topic today. Jeremy has been begging Caleb and I to do an episode today about one of his most greatest passions in life.
Yes.
Jeremy, what
One
in
of
the
my
world
greatest
are we
passions.
going to be babbling about today? And more importantly, why are we babbling about this today?
Well, we're babbling about it because you two were gracious enough to do it.
You're right about that.
I dragged them kicking and screaming into this because I believe in it so strongly. But
Okay.
we're going to be talking about an anime called Frieren Beyond Journey's End, which at one point, and I believe it still is the top-rated anime of all time according to Anime Watchers.
Interesting.
And I really like this. It's going to be a very different kind of episode. But we're for those of you who are not familiar with Frieren or anime or any of that in general, don't worry. We're gonna do a little bit of an intro to it.
I've
But
watched it and I still don't know.
yeah, but
So I have questions.
by the end of this episode, hopefully you will have at least an idea of why this is something we might want to talk about. Because, and this is going to be my main thesis, is that even though this is a piece of Japanese media that at first glance appears to be very far removed from theology and the Bible and things like that, I think that there are some interesting questions we can ask and some interesting things we can learn about like the messages of that are somewhat in conversation with theology and even Christianity, if I can be that bold, and also how those play to a mass market and in a very non-Christian culture, and to see some resonances there. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and also why we're doing this is because Jeremy's basically pleading his case as to why he forced us to watch this.
Yeah.
So he's really going to be going in strong as to why there's significance behind.
Yeah, Jeremy
anime.
is on trial. He's on trial with us, and he may be on trial with you, the listener, as well.
yeah, that's fine.
Um,
I don't
but
care.
one of the reasons why there are a couple of reasons why I finally just sort of gave in to this
He wouldn't shut up.
Yeah,
That's
well,
part of, that's about 80% of it, probably.
that's a big one. But the other thing is, I mean, well, the first thing I would say is to salvage our relationship.
That's good.
The other thing is think back to our episode on art, where we talked about art. If it's good, and the jury is still out, my friends.
TBD.
But if it is good, good art, really does cause you to reflect upon things that are sort of transcendent. We talked about that before, about how the art connects very closely to the transcendent. So we should have an open mind about going into a piece of art, any kind of art, even if it's not something in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, does this have something meaningful that we could meditate on?
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think good art needs to be true. That doesn't mean it's didactic or it's trying to indoctrinate you positively or negatively, but it does mean it has to reflect something that's fundamentally true about our world and the human experience. I think this show does, but I guess we'll talk about that as we go forward.
Well, so I have a quick question. So you've used several different terms, and like I have my own, I guess, and we can get into that in a little bit, my own preference towards like the comic genre. So like what is the difference between anime, manga, and like comic books? Can you kind of just like talk about that? Because I'm a little in the gray about that.
So you could write scholarly books about this. There's a very deep subject, but basically, as a result largely of World War II and how that turned out in Western influence, Japanese media became very influenced by Western media. Part of that was the comic books. But at the same time, the Japanese took some of that influence and combined it with traditional sensibilities and aesthetics and made it their own. And this gradually produced the manga and anime industry that we have today. Anime is, you can think of it as like the cartoons you watch in anime. Manga is like the comic books. There are different terms of art for all this. So if someone says, sometimes people use them interchangeably, they're not really interchangeable. Anime is the thing on the screen, manga is the thing in
Gotcha.
the book.
Okay.
What makes this confusing is that many of the more popular manga are adapted into anime. So, not all anime started as the comic book manga. Many of them did. Some are just totally original projects that get put on the screen, but many of them are adapted. And the one that we're talking about today, Frieren Beyond Journey's End, did begin as a manga. I actually have one of the books here in front of me
He
because
has
I'm
lots in
planning on
front of him.
referencing
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I do have lots in front of me. I have a book in front of me. I have a statue of Frieren that I own.
If you're not following us on social media, I highly recommend because I have several pictures that I'll drop on our page for you to see. It's quite a thing to
Yes,
see.
this is sort of like I'm buttressing myself against a possible attack. So this is why. But yeah, so that and to give you some perspective. Okay, so many of you, I'm guessing, are probably not familiar with anime or manga. You've never seen any of it yourself. You're vaguely aware of it in the culture. And sometimes it's like you might think of it as the thing that like the annoying young kids listen to, like the ones with crazy colored hair and like the graphic T-shirts. That is only like a very kind of very specific view of what that is. I looked these stats up because I know, as someone who's been into like comics and pop culture more generally, I know anime and manga is like a massive force. But I looked up the numbers, and according to the estimates I was able to find, Hollywood did about $25 billion gross in 2024. Anime, it's estimated they did somewhere around 34 billion
That's
globally.
wild.
Globally, right? This is globally. And there are signs of this and the influence of this industry all over the world. So when the creator of Dragon Ball Z, which is one of those that you've probably heard of it, even if you don't know anything about manga or anime, when that creator died recently, there were like building length murals of him being painted and his work being painted in South America. So this is a global force. It's every bit as strong, if not stronger, than Hollywood. So that right there is something that says, even if you don't like it, it might behoove you to know something about it.
Mm.
But also, one of the things that makes it interesting is that Japan has a really, really interesting culture for a number of reasons. They are a major economy that has somehow um, has somehow persisted and been a player on the global stage for some time, despite the fact that their culture has remained very traditionalist and conservative. Now, their conservative isn't our conservative, right? So, this is a Shintoist religious culture, which is largely secularized now, although it still has some versions of that. But it does mean that the typical globalist kind of, UN niceties about um, center left Western policies it doesn't have the traction in their culture that it does in a lot of European and Western democracies.
Mm.
So, for example, anime and manga are much more likely to just take it for granted the fact that like men and women are different. They may want different things. There is an objective evil, and we can't like overly complicate motivations. Sometimes bad guys are just bad, and we can lament the fact that they're distorted. Their evil has distorted them, but at the end of the day, you have to call evil evil, and you can't rationalize it.
Right.
And this isn't true across all manga and anime, but this is something that's this message is a lot more consistently found than in most popular Western media. Another thing as well, which is kind of shocking, is that there's the message of like, if you try and fail, you should do what you can to get better. And this idea of like you can have like a rival and it can, inspire both of you to achieve even more. This is very different than a lot of messages that are being spread in
Yeah.
Western media.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you. The thing that stuck out to me in your description of some of the things that they take for granted is the idea of evil that is sort of a brute fact,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, okay, some people are just this is just the way that they are. They're distorted.
Yeah,
The reason why that stuck out to me is because that is very different than Western media.
yeah,
I mean, the most popular trope, um, probably since at least since 2000, I would say.
mm-hmm.
Um, one of the most popular tropes in consumable media like television and movies has been the anti-hero
Yeah,
trope, right?
Mm.
Right, where it's like a character, whether it be Tony Soprano or Walter White or any of these big pop culture figures who are really villains,
yeah,
but they are presented in a story framework where they are also presented as
yeah,
the protagonist, the person that you root for.
yeah.
And so there is this like inherent blurring the
Mm-hmm.
lines of the morality. And there's let me be clear. There's value in this
Mm-hmm.
because what this shows is that human beings that we can sympathize with who
Mm-hmm.
are like us, right? That we might cheer on in certain contexts are capable of great evil,
Yeah,
right? That's a positive thing. But I think one of the maybe the more nefarious kind of implications that people can draw from that kind of trope is the idea um, that we can sort of blur or gray
yeah,
the edges of what is acceptable and what is
Mm.
evil, what is
yeah.
good.
In manga and anime, there are stories with
Sure.
anti-heroes.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, but that is not really the dominant thread.
Right.
That is one type of story you can tell. And if anything I say today inspires you to look a little more into this, there's a fantastic anime called Demon Slayer, which I almost had y'all
Sounds like a
watch.
metal band.
It does. Well, yeah, it does sound like that. But Demon Slayer is one of the best depictions in art that I have ever seen of hating evil but having sympathy for those who do evil.
Yeah.
Because there are literally people in that show who have been turned into literal monsters and have made choices that made themselves into that. But the main character consistently says, "What you're doing is wrong and I have to stop you," but is still shows compassion towards the person that they are. And it also goes into their backstories. And so you have that. It's and that show is exceptional. I don't want to, give you the impression that they're all like that. But there is this sense of which evil is evil. And, we can recognize that people believe different things and have different motivations, but at the end of the day, evil is still evil.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that is much more commonly seen and messaged in manga and anime than in Western media.
Yeah. Well, and when y'all were talking too, I was reminded even like some of the like American comics. American, right? Like the Avengers is
Yeah. Yeah.
American.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second guess myself
Americans
there.
basically
Yeah.
invented comics.
Yeah. But like thinking of Endgame and Thanos, like there's a certain like sympathy that I have with him,
Yes.
Yeah.
even as evil as he was. I think we see that more with because you were talking about the anti-hero, but even like the true villains, there's still like this I don't know, just sympathy that you draw from
Well,
them.
this idea, and again, I don't want to mislead our listeners into thinking that I think that the anti-hero thing is a bad thing necessarily because it can be valuable in a story.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why we find those kinds of villains very interesting is because it's something we can relate to the person, and we don't sort of just objectify them as a force of evil,
Mm.
because they become a person, but it's it's interesting because that kind of goes back, I would argue, to like Milton.
Mm.
He kind of does this with Satan
Yeah.
in his version of the story, where he sort of makes sympathy for the
Yeah.
devil kind of
To
a
make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven, yeah, as Milton would
yeah
say, which is that, like, there have been, and part of this is because of critics like, I believe, Stanley Fish, if I remember correctly, wanted to make Milton Satan into this tragic anti-hero
Mm.
yeah
that Milton didn't necessarily himself seemed interested in, but you can see how later he prepared the ground for later generations of
Right.
readers to take him that way.
Yeah.
Mm. So back to Frieren
Frieren.
and manga, anime, what have you. How did you get into this genre? And I'll ask you, Caleb, we can kind of all share like just overall thoughts of the genre itself. I don't have much
Mhm.
except for literally what I watched. But I do know that so in my previous role, I was a media specialist and Naruto, am I saying that
Yep,
right?
Naruto.
Was a big a lot of like the stories in manga, which is the written, right?
Mhm.
A lot of them were too like I worked in elementary school, so a lot of them were like too beyond what they should be reading. Just like not that it was
Yeah.
like dirty, but just, the thoughts and all of that. But that's kind of like all that I really knew about
Yeah.
anime and manga. So how did you like get into it?
I've been interested in American comics for a while, and I kept hearing people say, "Oh, this, manga's amazing. You got to read it." And I finally picked up a copy of My Hero Academia, which is one of
Oh,
the
I've heard that. Yeah.
big. It's like one of a handful that tends to be the gateway. So Naruto's a big one. Dragon Ball,
Mm,
Spy Family recently.
I've heard of
Um,
that.
and My Hero Academia, which is a good gateway because if you know Western superhero comics, the author of My Hero Academia was heavily inspired by Western superhero comics. It's just like a very solid, wholesome story of a kid who doesn't have powers, who wants to be a hero anyway. And he ends up getting powers and trying to save the world from this massive, the massive evil supervillain threat. And you meet he makes a ton of friends. Great story. And that was kind of my gateway. I read more manga than I do, but then I watch anime.
Mm,
Another thing that's really interesting about this is that there are so many different types of manga and anime. Like in the West, comics are superheroes mainly, like 90% of them.
mm,
Um, in manga, there's all kinds of stuff. There's rom com for men and women. There's what's called slice of life, which is just about appreciating everyday stuff and mildly humorous. There's superhero. There's supernatural. There's fantasy. There's someone getting dropped into another world all of a sudden. There's stuff that's like practically video game stories, and they even go into like statistics and stuff. So that is one of the other interesting things. The major hurdle I'd say is like the culture shock.
yeah.
There are some weird tropes like the facial expressions, the exaggeration, all of that can throw a lot of people off. But there's some really really good stories there. So yeah. But
Yeah.
Caleb, what about you? I know we've talked about this, so I know this is not your favorite thing in the world.
No, but I'll confess, it's not my favorite thing in the world, um, and I have not consumed very much of it at all. And I think I'll explain. I mean, first of all, the
Let me explain.
I love comics.
Mm.
Yeah.
We'll do an episode. Don't worry, Court. I can see you squirming over here in fear that we might not address it, but we will do an episode on comics.
I
Mm.
can't wait.
Yeah. So I think comic books are a great medium for storytelling because, well, for a number of reasons. One of which being the sort of the same reason that cinema is. It's a combination of words, whether it be written or spoken, and images to
Mm.
tell a story, which I think gets you really close to real life. Right, and so that's one reason why comics I think are great. The other reason why I like comic books, um, other than just being a nerd,
Yeah.
Nerds.
other than just being a nerd, is that in American comics, because they are primarily like superhero genre or whatever, they're pretty close to, or they share the benefits of another genre that I think is super super valuable, especially from someone who likes philosophy and theology, which is that there's a fantastical element about it.
Hmm.
And fantasy,
Yeah.
um, the fantasy genre, and I'm using that in a very broad
Mm,
sense, is a really good vehicle for thinking about transcendent things
Mhm.
because it takes you beyond the normal, right? I mean, of course, there's elements of the everyday, right? So, but which makes it relatable. But then there's something that's a little bit beyond the normal, and it makes you meditate upon
Mm.
transcendent themes. So that's why I think that fantasy things like J.R.R. Tolkien,
You had to bring it
of
up.
course I did,
Yeah.
and things like that are such theologically rich material when you meditate on it is because of that in part
Mhm.
at least. So that's one reason why I like comics. So you would, I mean, you're probably listening thinking, well, why doesn't this nerd like manga and anime too if he loves comics so much,
Wait, you
right?
don't like it? Is that what you're saying?
Um, yeah, I have a I would call it a visceral
Mm,
sort of distaste for it.
you don't say.
Um,
Mhm.
it's guttural, you know. It's
He
a
he had to tie himself into the chair to actually watch this.
yeah,
So.
it's more of a it's more of like a an immune response than it
Yeah.
is than it is like a conscious decision. I'm just repulsed, revulsed. I'm not sure which word. Um, but
Oh my.
listen, I'm being harsh, but I actually think that and I thought about this, and I have some questions for Jeremy on this. But
Yeah.
the one of the reasons why I haven't consumed very much of it, I was aware of it vaguely as a child because of Dragon Ball Z,
Mhm.
because
Mm,
all the kids my age were into that.
yeah.
I never was. I never
I
liked
didn't
it.
realize that was anime.
Yeah, and so like and Pokemon, right? Like
Yeah.
there's lots of
Wait, is
examples.
Pokemon considered anime?
Well, Pokemon is its own media
Okay.
franchise, but
It's
they're
related in some
the
way.
Yeah.
movies, the TV shows, those are anime.
Yeah.
Mm,
So anyway, I have this aversion to it. The reason why I haven't sort of taken in very much of it, I think is mostly because of the aesthetic.
Mhm.
Like it's and it's not that it's foreign necessarily because I like art from other cultures. I just think that there's something in particular about the Japanese aesthetic that um I'm not saying that it's objectively bad or anything like that. It just doesn't appeal to me.
mm,
And so because of that, I just if given an opportunity to pick up two pieces of art and one of them is this, I'm just never going to pick it up.
That's
mm.
fair.
So I guess one of my questions for you, Jeremy, is a couple questions. One is a more general. Why do you think the statistics that you read are kind of
That's
wild?
wild,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the popularity of this really boggles the mind. We're
Mhm.
on a global stage. Like, and I heard recently, like one of the most popular things on Netflix right now is an anime.
Yeah.
And so like hugely popular.
Hugely.
Um, why do you think that this particular medium or genre or whatever you want to call it, why do you think it's so popular worldwide as opposed to other
Mm.
forms of consumable art? And then what is it about the aesthetic that you find tolerable?
Tolerable. Oh, that's a very complicated question. I think it does go back to the fact that the most large media concerns in the West have lost the plot. I mean, there are good movies here and there. There
Mm,
are good writers here and there. But there is a cultural. We have passed a kind of cultural threshold to where most Western media is being produced in an environment where there are not a lot of things that are agreed upon culturally, and that creates a very diffuse aesthetic product. Japan is by no means, in lockstep on all, like, not obviously, not every creator in Japan, not every person in Japan believes the same thing, but they have a much more homogenous culture. And because of that, I think there is a sense of a vitality, a sense of the fact that this is coming from like a living culture that knows what it is and knows what it's about,
mm,
that comes through an anime and manga that you don't get in a lot of Western properties. And I think for many people, that sense of vitality and energy outweighs the culture shock, because a lot of the alternatives just aren't appealing to them because it's the same, watered down, silly nonsense, spouting the same empty platitudes that they get in other places. So the young kids would say anime and manga is more likely to be based,
Yeah.
based in reality. Um, so there is something about that. I have heard people argue that anime is inherently conservative in its aesthetics, and this gets to your aesthetic question, because even though it is over the top and kind of, the characters have these, exaggerated massive eyes and whatever, at the root of that aesthetics is the idea that like, you know, cuteness is good. Cuteness and
Innocence,
also
maybe.
innocence
Yeah.
maybe is good, and things should look nice. Maybe it's a little too nice and trying too hard to look, nice.
Yeah.
But which is a lot different than the aesthetics that are pushed in the West often, which are trying to get you to appreciate something that's ugly
Yeah.
or mean spirited. And I think that has a lot to do with it. It's kind of refreshing to see, an entire industry that's not really pushing a message most of the time, but that's just, oh, you like to look at, nice things. We're going to try to draw something that's nice, whether that's like a very detailed animated landscape that, you just kind of linger on for a while, or it's like a character that, the creator did every possible thing they could to make that character look like interesting and cool or whatever, rather than engage in, I'm going to get political for a second, but like body positivity, because we need
Right.
to pretend that we can reshape our perception of what is and is not attractive
Right.
for political ends.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Another follow-up question. This might not make any sense, so just swat it away if it doesn't. But like, do you think? And I'm asking because I haven't consumed much of this. Do you think that you would call it a medium or genre that is highly original in the stories? Because one of the things that bugs me about
Mhm.
Western art is the lack of originality,
Mhm.
especially in Hollywood. Hollywood, it seems to me, has really gotten bogged down in the economics of filmmaking,
Yeah.
such that studios are much more likely to just make a remake, a
Yeah.
reboot,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
Or 2 or 3.
Or three, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we'll do it with women this time, right? Or
Yeah.
as Ghostbusters or whatever.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's like what we're
How
doing
dare they
is
use women?
no, it's
It's
not the women
crazy.
thing. It's it's the rehashing of the
Yeah.
material, right?
Just trying to put a new
It's like
spin on
let's
it.
put a different filter on this, or
Mhm.
let's decorate it slightly differently,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then sell it as though it were a new
Yeah.
product. And it's
Let's
really not
let's
new.
make
It's
the
just
fourth
repackaged.
remake of Fantastic Four, and maybe it'll be good this time.
It is
I do
good.
wanna
The
see
the
the
It's
reboot of Freaky Friday.
it
I
is
have to
good.
bring us back to some normalcy here. I mean, we're getting too far in the
Yeah,
nerds.
So to answer your question, yes and no. Anime and manga has a ton of tropes. If you watch or read any amount of it, you will recognize some of the same kind of beats or things that show up repeatedly. And also, if anything, the Japanese economy and corporations are hyper obsessed with bottom lines and profitability.
yeah,
And that has to do with, the fact that their economy hasn't been great for the last few decades. But I will say this is that anime and manga are you're constantly getting new franchises, right? Like every single multiple times a year there's new stories coming out. They don't do the thing that Western comics and Western media tend to do, which is like, oh, this worked, let's just keep relaunching the same thing and call it a new story, but it's really not.
right.
Like there are things like massive smash hits like One Piece, which have been running forever, um, which are still ongoing and that stay around. But that tends to be a continuation of the same story. It's
Mm.
not like a reboot and rehash.
Well, isn't that
Um,
kind of what American comics do? I mean, we've been
Not really.
rewriting, but I mean, like, there's a new comic every day of
Oh
Spider-Man. How
yeah,
many different stories can you make
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
about the same character?
So to give you an idea, in the last 20 years, DC has rebooted their continuity 3, if not 4 times.
Yeah.
And that's to say, like, we're keeping all the same characters, so we have an audience for this. But we're just gonna
We're gonna start
pretend
over.
we're gonna pretend like those stories didn't happen
Yeah.
until it's convenient for us to pretend they did happen, and then it becomes like this massive mess. Manga and anime are much more likely to just say, "Oh, here's a new property," and it may be like things that you've seen before, but it's not recycling the same characters.
Gotcha.
Or we'll make a multiverse, and then we can have infinite possibilities of what we
Yeah.
can create.
I think you're a
Come
hater
on.
against nerds. That's what you are.
I am for sure,
Except it's
especially the two in the room.
I,
But
I'm
don't you
with
find it-
Courtney on the multiverse hate. I'm with her on that.
No, I get that, but I'm. It's interesting to see your hate for nerds, given that you surround yourself with them as your close friends. What
you
does it
know,
say about you?
I have a soft place in my heart for nerds. Maybe it's because I bullied them in
Uh,
school. And I'm just kidding. I wasn't a bully.
I
But
think you're
no,
a nerd at heart.
well, maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. But I just can't. My thoughts around comics, Caleb and I was talking about this a little bit ago, but because I love to read, I think my issue with comics is that I'm such a fast reader and I want the content, but I don't want to slow down and like look at the pictures. I just want to read. So, I mean, I guess we'll do a comic
We will.
episode.
Yeah.
But like
We'll have to.
Mouse, for example, I loved that book,
Great comic, by the way.
but I would have much more enjoyed that if it was like a novel.
Mm.
I mean, the graphics I could have done away. And actually what happened was I would read and then be like, what in the world is happening? And I had to go back and look because I missed half of the content
Mhm.
because it was all in the pictures.
It's interesting because that's actually a really good example of how I don't think it would work as a novel. And the reason why is because the way he tells the story visually is like 50% of the impact.
Yeah. And I appreciated like the way that he wrote it with the mouse and all of that.
Yeah.
And drew it, but I don't know. It's just nerdy and I can't get
We'll make you
behind
into
it.
a believer.
We'll,
It's okay.
we'll get into that. I want to so with some of the stuff around anime and manga, and we'll probably circle around to that at the end as to when we're talking about like takeaways and stuff, and how to think of this as Christians. I want to get into Frieren itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I love this show. I love this
Okay.
manga. And it's interesting that Caleb mentioned The Lord of the Rings. Because
Yeah.
I told him before this started, I said, this show is like if a Japanese person continued The Lord of the Rings after it wrapped up. And then, Caleb, do you remember what you said to me after you watched
yeah,
it?
when you said that to me, I was like, oh, he's saying that this is going to be like influence, like there's going to be some thematic influence, from Lord of the Rings. And then I turned this on and started watching this, and I was like, oh no, he meant it very literally.
Yeah.
Like there's a dwarf and an elf and a man and a wizard
Yep.
mage or whatever, It's like,
It is a Japanese Lord of the Rings.
like
Is that
it's
what you're
their
saying?
version of
Yeah.
the Lord of the Rings.
So Frieren is, I'll give you just like the overview of it.
Yeah.
Is there's a party of heroes, right? There is Frieren, the mage, the elf, who
The figurine in front of me
yeah,
right now.
the figurine. And elves in this universe are like elves in the Lord of the Rings. They are practically immortal. They age extremely slowly. They will not die of natural causes if left to their own devices. There is a dwarf named Eisen. Dwarves in this universe are not exactly like the Lord of the Rings. This guy runs really fast for some reason.
Yeah.
We don't know why.
We
but
dwarves are natural sprinters.
Yeah.
Says.
But he is a warrior. He is a warrior. He is small, so that checks out. He also lives quite long, though not as long as elves. There is Heiter, the priest, and we could later episodes get into some of the theology of this world. Heiter, the priest, he's kind of in charge of like the healing and the protecting the party kind of thing. And then there's Himmel, the hero. And Himmel the hero he's like a warrior, but he's bigger than that. He's kind of like the symbol of hope. And you have to ask yourself, okay, if these are the heroes, who are they fighting against? Well, they're fighting against demons, and specifically the Demon King. The Demon King is a trope in anime and manga. It's kind of like the big main supernatural bad guy. But in this universe, it is literally a Demon King like Sauron. And the story picks up right after they have defeated the Demon King. So the party of heroes is successful. They win. They defeat the Demon King. Everybody's really happy. There's an era of peace and prosperity. There are still demons running around in the world, but the main threat is taken out. And the question becomes, well, what happens now? And that's why the subtitle of this story is Beyond Journey's End. There's also another meaning to that we'll get into in a little bit. And in the first episode, what we see is that Frieren, this immortal mage, is about to go her own separate way from the party of heroes. And they're in their 20s or 30s, the humans are. And she makes a comment of, oh, well, we're watching this meteor shower. It'll happen again in 50 years, so I'll just see you guys then. And then she just journeys off. And 50 years pass, and she hasn't really changed, and she comes back. And she's shocked that her friends have aged so much. And one of them is Himmel, is fairly decrepit. He's like a bent, wizened old man. And they go to see the meteor shower. And in the first episode, he passes away. And she goes through a process gradually of where she has to come to terms with this. And she realizes that she's been taking things for granted. And so the rest of the story is, and this like 24 plus episodes of this anime.
Caleb and I watched 1,
Yeah.
2, and 4, by the way.
1, 2, and 4.
I
Yeah.
watched the first 4. I actually watched episode
Yeah.
3 as well.
Oh,
Yeah, I
not
wanted
me.
to
Wow.
wanted to do either I wanted to do homework or I'm a masochist. One
Yeah.
of the two.
Well, the rest of the story is about her coming to terms with this and realizing that
Mm.
she's been taking time for granted. And it's a story. I mean, there are still demons to fight. There's still stuff to do, and some of the later episodes that we didn't watch have a lot of direct conflict with the demons. But the core of it is really about her coming to terms with the passage of time and I would say human mortality.
Yeah. So this is the one thing. So I was watching this and, um, not gonna say I was like thoroughly enjoying it, but I was curious to see what kind of storytelling that they were going to be doing, and what kind of themes were going to be sort of conveyed. And the one that I told Jeremy this right after I watched it, like the one that really stuck out to me was this question of the problem of mortality,
Mm.
right? And it sort of hangs over the episodes that we watched. It sort of hangs over each one because it's like this question of, and the way that they wrestle with the question is a figure who will live forever unless something intervenes, in an environment of people who have a very, comparatively speaking, short life and a short
Mhm.
span. And so it's like there's this inevitability of death, and how do we come to grips with it? How can there even, and this is something I think from the main character's Frieren, her perspective, which is to say, like, how can something so short and finite have meaning and value? How can it even be valuable if it's so short, right? Like, can you even get to know someone in such a short amount of time? What kind of lasting value or purpose does something so fleeting even have? And I think that those are actually really kind of profound questions.
Yeah.
And I think about that in terms of like, well, from a naturalistic point of view, like if you're a naturalist and you don't believe in God, and you think that that there is nothing beyond journey's end, right? Which is the subtitle of the show, right? It's like, if there's nothing beyond the end of this journey of your finite life, does anything matter?
Yeah, what's the point? Yeah.
And even not just from a personal point of view, like, we live like 80 years, roughly, but in terms of the cosmos itself,
Right.
on the grand scheme of eternity, if the cosmos lasts, tens of billions of years, maybe, that seems like an insurmountable number to us. But in terms of in eternity, it's incredibly finite.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so the question is like, well, all of existence, if that's all that exists, does it what kind of meaning and purpose and value can that have
Right.
apart from eternity, or from something beyond the end of
Right.
Mm.
our mortal journey?
Yeah. I know this is not kind of where you're going with it, but I was talking to with my husband about this the other day. Just we've just seen a lot of just suffering and hard times, I guess, around us with those that we love, and just thinking on people that don't have hope in God. Like,
Hmm.
how, for one, kind of like what you were saying, like, what is the purpose of us even being here? Like, how do you not, I guess my thing is, how can you not believe in God, just us being here on the earth? Like, we have a purpose, but apart from that as well, how do people that don't have God in their life survive the world? Like,
Yeah.
truly, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the hope that we have in Him is all that we need. I don't
Yeah.
know, just
And we see some of that. It's interesting how this show is very strong evidence for common grace, I would say,
Hmm.
in the sense that, this is a I don't manga writers tend to be fairly private about their personal lives. I have no indication that the writer is religious. They've definitely read the Lord of the Rings, and
Yeah.
that comes through some.
Right.
But we find within the first 4 episodes, Frieren starts off not really thinking about mortality, believing that there is no afterlife, believing that, we just kind of, when people die or whatever, they stop existing. And going to, she, through her attachment, which is, I think, a very, very interesting, kind of like Dante, like a divine comedy kind of thing,
Mm.
where through her attachment to this one person who's named Himmel, um, and regretting the fact that she didn't treat that relationship, with purpose, thinking, well, what if, could there be life after death? What if there is? And hoping for something more than just, this mortal life. And it's interesting as well how this show becomes a little bit of an allegory. I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but Himmel means heaven. And all of the characters in this show who knew Himmel were inspired to be better people by his example.
Mm.
Because the priest adopts a war orphan named Fern, who becomes very important later on as Frieren's apprentice. And Frieren is talking to Hyder, the priest, about why he did this. Because when she knew him, he was largely, or at least he liked to pretend to be selfish and, not really interested in altruism or things like that. But he said, and he said something that many characters in the show say, which is, it's something Himmel would have done.
Yeah.
And that, I think, that's a theme in the show. And if you think about it allegorically, then it's something that heaven would have done. It's something that this ideal hero would have done. And so, therefore, I am going to do it because I respect that and I want to be like that.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned Fern, and this is something that I really we'll get to, like, our overall thoughts, I guess, maybe towards the end of the episode, but something I really appreciated in the show was you see this, like, my interpretation, like, this lack of hope in Frieren, right?
Mhm.
Like, she's living forever and everyone's dying around her. You know, the one person that she really had this attachment to is gone, and then Fern comes in and you really see, like, she is not, like, wanting anything to do with her, and you see this almost, like, lack of hope and trust and, like, wanting to form this connection with somebody because she knows that, and she doesn't, have the hope that there's something after this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this idea is like, well, why would I create this connection with this person, because they're just going to die,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
right? And because of her different perspective on the passage of time,
Hmm.
Mm,
um, it's like, well, it's not worth it for the short amount of time, because then it's going to haunt her once the person is gone.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, because I think about some of the ways that people approach this issue, because this question of human mortality sort of, it hangs over all of us, um, but everyone sort of lives as though the actions that we take, the choices that we make, the relationships that we have, that they do have ultimate meaning, purpose, and value.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone sort of does this. Even the people who say that they don't believe
Mm-hmm.
in eternity
Mm.
do this as though it's almost like they're just pretending.
Yeah.
I mean, that might be a caricature of their point of view, but it does seem to me like I don't really know why. And so, because if there's no lasting, you mentioned suffering earlier, and
Mm.
well, that's a whole topic for another episode,
Mhm.
Yeah.
frankly, because it's such a huge topic. But I really do think this is a huge problem on the idea of the finitude of life, because if life is just finite and it will have a definite end, that is on comparison to eternity is extraordinarily short,
Yeah.
then then really the defining feature of life is suffering, and it has there's no reason why you should endure it,
Right. Yeah.
right? So there's no good justification for
Yeah.
me to keep going in the midst of suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's nothing on the other side of
Yeah.
it.
It's just going to
Yeah.
end anyways
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah, and the way that the show expresses this in its own kind of flawed, not really gospel centered way is like, well, if there's not an afterlife, then no one gets rewarded for the good they do,
Yeah.
which seems like a great injustice. And all the characters, and you hear that, and it's like, yeah, you're right, and all the characters resonate with that. Um, and yeah, so there is this sense basically of like, if good and evil are real and they matter, then there has to be something that gives that traction that's more than just, like, well, all that goes away once we blink out of existence.
Well, and if you flip it on its head and look at it from the other point of view, because I've been talking about like the naturalist perspective, that there is no
Hmm.
afterlife. But if you flip it on its head and say, okay, let's assume that there is an eternity,
Hmm.
um, well, then now you can at least, I'm not saying that it absolves the difficulty of suffering and pain, but you can at least rationalize perseverance through suffering if you
Mm.
believe in an eternity, because
Right.
then the question of finitude actually becomes a positive now, because it's like,
Right. Yeah.
because now if my existence is tethered to this idea of an eternal future,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
then the temporary, Paul says, this momentary affliction,
Right.
Hmm.
right, in comparison to the unending nature of
Yeah.
eternity, is literally just a blip on the radar
Yeah.
in terms of time. And even though I'm prisoner of this moment, right? I mean, we're getting on the question of time, right?
Hmm.
I go back and listen to our episode on time, but like, I'm a prisoner of this moment, and so
Mm-hmm.
yes, the suffering seems insurmountable while I go
Hmm.
through it, but if I have a hope of an eternity,
Exactly. Yeah.
then I can place myself there
Yeah.
mentally and
Mm-hmm.
think
Yeah.
about this eternity, and think that once I'm there, once I'm in that state, I can look back upon that momentary affliction and say, wow, what a fleeting,
Mm.
passing
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
The way into just to get us back to the show, there's I think one of the most moving scenes in it is where the party is there and they're at the graves of some of the people who have been killed by demons,
Mm.
and the priest named Hyder kneels down to pray, and they say, what good is praying? They're dead, they're gone. You don't really believe in an afterlife, do you? And he says, at the time, he says, well, wouldn't it be better to believe in an afterlife? Wouldn't it be better to believe in heaven?
Yeah.
And he convinces them all, okay, maybe we'll believe in this out of convenience. But in the future, you see the dwarf who kneels down to pray at the grave of his family who was killed by demons.
Mm.
And it's moved from something that wouldn't it be nice if it were true to something that has become most likely true and something that the characters are willing to believe in.
Yeah, that kind of caught my attention too, because of course, hearing the priest say that,
Yeah.
It's
So
a Pascalian wager.
yeah, it is, and he's called a corrupt priest. So he drinks a lot.
Yeah,
He's
he's
not
a
a very
boozer, like some
moral. Yeah,
preachers I know. You know who
he
you are.
he's not a morally good person at the start of the show.
Yeah,
But it's clear that by the time it reaches the present day, that a lot of his pretending to be a corrupt priest is an act, and he has really kind of embraced
yeah,
Himmel's example.
yeah. This, and if for those of you who aren't familiar about Pascal's wager,
Thank you. Yeah.
is Blaise Pascal basically says, look, let's do a cost benefit analysis, right, of belief in God and the gospel and non-belief. What are the pros and cons, right? And basically, and I'm giving a very abbreviated and simplified version of this, but essentially it is like, look, the benefit of believing this and acting as though it were true, is an infinite value. If it is, you can't measure what a windfall that would be if you choose that path. Whereas if you choose the alternate path and don't believe, there is no opportunity for value.
Yeah.
Because you lose either way.
It's a lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose, right? And
Okay.
so Pascal's wager basically says, look, it is to your benefit to choose this horn of the dilemma,
might
to
as
believe or
well,
not to
yeah.
believe, right? And you can discuss the merits of that argument or of that
Right.
proposition how you want. And some people would rightly say, well, look, just choosing to act as though something were true, and maybe that's not quite the same thing as truly believing or
Right.
putting trust in.
But I think what the show argues, and what I think there is some merit into,
Yeah.
is that initial willingness to entertain the idea can blossom into something like a real belief.
Yeah.
And that I think is one of the messages of the show, which is very countercultural for our own culture at large, but also Japanese culture.
Yeah.
Which, Shintoism, there is not a continuation of your existence. There is
Right.
at best a reincarnation, maybe. You don't really retain fundamental aspects of your identity. But in the show, it turns out that Frieren's the person who taught Frieren, her mentor, it was a human named Flamma. And Flamma is a legendary mage. This was when Frieren was young, so it's like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And everybody, there's all these fake writings attributed to Flamma floating around, and none of them are real. Well, Frieren actually finds a real one. And when she finds a real one, she, in Flamma's writings, Frieren learned something that she never knew, which was that Flamma believed that there actually was a heaven, and that the way to get to it was by going to basically the Demon King's abode, and the souls of the dead live on somehow, and that you can actually, like, they still exist, and you can get to heaven. And so this becomes the defining quest for Frieren for the rest of the show and the rest of the story, is that it literally becomes a search for heaven.
Yeah.
Which I think is again, Himmel, heaven. She's looking for heaven. She wants to meet Himmel in heaven. I mean, there's all sorts of allegorical things going on here. But the idea that, like, wouldn't it be nice if it were true? You could turn that on its head and say, well, some things just have to be true, because otherwise nothing that we do makes sense. I think the belief in eternity and the afterlife is one of those things.
Yeah, and there is something to be said, to give Pascal his due, even though that's not maybe a go-to argument that I use often, but there's something to it because of the reasons that you mentioned just now, but also there's some truth in the idea of we're liturgical beings, and when we act things out, when we create rhythms in our life, those things actually play deeply into our spirit, our spiritual self, right? And so you can imagine someone who may just say, look, for the sake of convenience, or for the sake of it would be better if this were true,
Mhm.
sort of walking it out in a mechanical way. You can see how that very process will actually lead them to have the vision to be able to see the real spiritual truth of it. And so, it's like, give it a try in a way,
Yeah.
in a very, and that might sound simplistic, but it's like, try this
Mm.
and see if it doesn't ring true to you once you give it a shot.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so to wrap it up, do we want to give our just final overall thoughts? We've been holding back a little bit, I feel like.
Yeah. So, I'll
So
start.
did you guys like this? Be honest.
I liked all of those themes that I just babbled about. I liked very much, because I think that they're true themes. They're eternal themes. I mean, literally
Mhm.
eternal themes.
Get to it though.
In terms of
Yes or no?
the actual art itself, it's not my cup of tea.
That's fine.
And here's another reason why. Beyond the visceral, guttural, immune response, revulsion that I have. Um, I also watched it the whole time thinking, because it was so literally a successor to Tolkien from a Japanese perspective, that the whole time I was watching, I was like, I would rather just watch Tolkien,
Mm.
like watch
Maybe
the
just put
Peter
on Lord of the
Jackson's
Rings.
films, or pick up the book and read it,
Yeah.
because it's like that's far superior to me. So like, and those themes are explored there too. So it's just like, it's not my thing, but the olive branch I'll extend to Jeremy is that I understand why you see value in it,
Mm.
even though I think it's overblown.
Fair enough.
Mm. So after this episode, I have a new appreciation for it. I hated it. I watched the first 2 episodes
And you were like,
and
how am I going to
I
get through the third
could
one?
not get
Yeah.
through the first 2.
Yeah.
I had to take days until I watched the 4th. Did not watch
Hilarious.
the 3rd. Could not watch the 3rd. I don't
They're
know.
short. That is the good thing. If
Yes.
you know,
I don't know. I think it's again. Well, I think a big thing of why I didn't like. I watched with the English overlaid because it's
Yeah.
in
So yeah,
Japanese.
so you watched the original Japanese language and then it had English
No,
subtitles?
no, I watched it with
Dubbed.
the dubbed.
You
You
watched
might
the
say
dub, okay.
yes, and it was just so awkward for me.
Yeah.
I don't, and so I'm giving it grace in that I think a lot. Uh, some of my displeasure with it was just like
Mhm.
the awkwardness of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, and I'm not like a big like animated person anyways. So I don't know.
That is all totally fair. The anime purists, most of them will tell you that if you're going to watch it, it's the ones with the original Japanese voice acting with the English subtitles are better. Because one of the things that English voice actors do is they try to match their cadences to the mouth movements of the
Mhm.
animated characters, which leads to like really stilted rhythms and
Yeah, it
stuff.
was just really
I
awkward
can
is the only way I know how to
I
describe
watched the
it.
dub version as well, and I can, even though I haven't seen the original version, I can already tell you it would be better.
Yeah.
For the very reason that you said, there is something literally lost in translation where it
Mhm.
becomes clunky and irregular,
Yeah.
which can definitely like hamper
Yeah.
your enjoyment of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
material.
But thank you guys for giving it a shot.
Yes.
And
Will I watch it on my own ever? No. If we want
that's
to do another
fine.
episode, maybe in 5 years,
Well,
So
I'll give it another
I actually
shot.
am curious. I mean, the thing is like, uh, it would have to be something that really extraordinarily caught my attention. But I am actually sort of vaguely curious if there is something out there, because it's such a vast genre.
yeah.
If there is something out there that might actually appeal to me, I doubt it. I highly
But
doubt
you've
it.
piqued his
the
curiosity. I
the
mean, that is a win in itself, I feel like.
the answer to your question, Caleb, is yes, but it's just a matter of finding it.
Finding it.
So for those of you listening at home, the way this likely matters to you, unless you're already kind of like interested in this stuff, is there's a younger person in your life
Yes.
who's interested in anime or manga.
That's true.
Maybe a child, maybe just somebody you know.
Hopefully not mine.
So I mean, fair enough.
Statistically speaking, probably.
Statistically, probably. But so just to give you some like pointers or ways to think through this, number one, it is okay to think it's weird, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to
Yes,
be
it
like,
is.
well, that's something I'm never interested in, and it's weird, and I don't know why people like that. That's okay. If you want to build bridges with that person in your life, just ask them, why do you like this?
Yeah.
What do you find interesting about this? I will also say for the parents in our audience, it is true that there is a chunk of manga and anime that Christians have no business watching, intaking. Some of it is just at its fundamental root degenerate.
As is the case with all.
Yeah,
media.
as is the
Yeah,
case
it's
with
not just
some
manga.
Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
But the stereotype that all manga and anime is like that is just fundamentally wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So ask. Don't. I would recommend. Don't be overbearing or hostile. Ask them. What is it about this? Do your due diligence as a parent if your kid is into this stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be your favorite thing, but I hope that I've convinced you that at least some of it has value and that there are bridges, in some cases very strong bridges, between this type of media and Christian truth and potential to talk about Christian truth and to, understand our world, because all truth is God's truth. And I think good stories are fundamentally true in some way.
Yeah. I'll just say my final word in echoing what you said, because I hate to admit it, but it is true, I think, because, like even just doing like small group work with our youth group at our church, you find young people, girls and boys, by the way,
Yeah.
referring to this kind of genre. And of course I'm completely clueless as to what they're talking about, but this is the popularity and commonplace like knowledge of this amongst the younger generation, like, but behind us, we're old. I mean, the three of us here are old.
Yeah, how about that?
Is really extraordinary. And so there's something about it beyond 13-year-old pink-haired girls with giant meat cleavers. There's something about it that appeals to their sensibilities. And so it's if you have a burden for a younger generation, then it's not a waste of time to sort of investigate at least what it is that they're being attracted to.
Yeah. Well, if you're interested in it, Frieren might be a good start for you. Wasn't for me. That's okay. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.